My name is Stein Inge Morisbakk. I come from Norway, where I work for a consultancy company called Beck. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Ansible and how you implement zero downtime with Ansible. Not every one of us is working like in a 1,000-machine cloud environment where you have really these big solutions at scale. Some of us work for smaller companies which have a lot less servers. And what I'm going to talk about is an experience with working for that kind of company. We don't have that many servers. We have more than 2 or 4, but to simplify, I'm going to use an example with 4 servers. And the reason we started looking at Ansible was that before that, we used a lot of bash scripts to automate zero downtime deployment. And as you all may know, bash scripts can turn into hell. And maintaining bash scripts can be really, really hard once they get bigger and bigger. So we had to find a way to simplify that, and we looked to Ansible, which was a great success. So this talk is really, I've given this presentation as a workshop earlier, like a half-day workshop, where you get to do stuff hands-on. Of course, I don't have time for that in 1 hour, so I'll have to walk through the examples myself and show you some code. But please visit my GitHub repo, and you can do the full tutorial. Download the code, try it yourself. I've set it up with branches, so just do git branch, and you'll see task 1, task 2, task 3, and you can walk through those. Find all the information at my GitHub site. Let's start with defining what a provisioning framework is. There's probably a lot more, but at least it's automation. It's automation of the setup of servers. And it's configuration as code. So you can actually read what your servers look like by looking at the code. It's important to, as we experienced, that a provisioning framework is not the same as immutable infrastructure in itself. You can use a provisioning framework to provision servers that are immutable, and you can deploy them. But in itself, it's not immutable. You can't guarantee that everything will be exactly as it's supposed to be, because you may have like configuration drift. So if you tear down the servers every time and provision, you'll get something like immutable servers, but not in itself. So some examples of what you can use a provisioning framework, which we will look at. You can create users, install software, generate and manipulate config files on your servers, start, stop, restart processes, and you can also set up dependencies between these operations. So just a few examples. This is where we came from, bash scripts. And bash scripts, they are imperative. They describe exactly what they do, and you step through the script from top to bottom. Problem with that is when something goes wrong in a bash script, you can't just run it again and expect that everything will be okay. You'll have to handle stuff like rollback, handling stuff like fixing up all the mess that you've created, all the half-done tasks and such, which can be really hell. So enter a provisioning framework. A provisioning framework is declarative, which means that you describe state. You describe how your servers will look like when you run the provisioning framework, which is different. And you can run these several times, and you can expect that the result will be the same. And the provisioning framework will handle stuff like stopping. If it isn't able to complete the task, it doesn't do it halfway or leave a mess. You can fix the problem, run the framework again. So some pros is that it's in source control. So you know what your service looks like by looking at the code. It's self-documenting. It's code. So we've got all your documentation there. Refactoring. It's easy to refactor your infrastructure. What is a common problem while using provisioning frameworks is that if you do something and you remove that task and you don't tear down your server in between, the configuration from that task will be left. So you have to either tear down your server, build it again, or you'll have to write a task that rolls back that change. You get, of course, less differences between environments because you run the same provisioning against several servers. It's deterministic. So you know when you run it, it will look exactly the same as what you thought it would. And of course, it prevents manual steps. And it's really fast and easy to configure up a new environment. You just run the scripts on a new server. And it's also easier to test your server setup. A little bit about Ansible. You have several provisioning frameworks out there like Puppet, Chef, or Salt, and yeah, you've got many of them. But Ansible, the reason why I like Ansible is because of its simplicity. You don't need to install an agent or set up a big framework on your servers. You just run it from your local machine or your jump host or whatever, and it uses SSH to provision the servers. So it's client only. It uses YAML configuration, which is quite easy to read. It's basically push. You could use a pull-based model, but the push model is what I will show here, and it's what I like about it when it comes to deploying applications. Because I want to push the button, and I want to see what happens. I want to see the logs. And it supports more than setup and provisioning, like application deployment, which I will show, and also remote command execution. It's over SSH. Instead of writing this huge, complicated one-liner, you could actually write a readable task. So I'm using Vagrant to show how this works. Are you familiar with Vagrant? Who's not familiar with Vagrant? A few. Well, Vagrant is a way to set up an environment on your local machine that is virtual. So you can have equal servers on your local machines. You can bring up servers based on the same images on your local machine. So I've got a bunch of Linux servers on my local machine, which I will be working against. And I use Vagrant, which is sort of a framework for scripting the setup or the starting and stopping of these servers, creation and destroying, and such. And it uses VirtualBox, which is sort of the virtualization engine. And it can take some time, so I've already done it. So this is what the output looks like. I use an image, a HashiCorp image, a Ubuntu image. And it sets up all these, it sets up ports, forwards ports and stuff. It applies an SSH address. It sets up some shared directories so I can work on files on my local computer, which is mounted inside the images. I'm not going to use that, but yeah, you get the You get the idea. So I brought up the boxes. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Ansible layout. Ansible uses convention over configuration, which is, I think it's nice, because you don't have to think about all these ways of setting up your project to your needs, because Ansible uses reasonable conventions. So if you stick to them, you're better off. All the documentation, all the examples, everything uses these conventions. So you have a config file, which looks like this, where you can specify some defaults so that you don't have to give these arguments on the command line. So for instance, this is my hosts file, which describes which hosts I have, the user I want to log on with, my private key, and stuff like that. And of course, this is just for local testing, so I would have secured my keys better if it was. Some SSH arguments that I want to be there for default, stuff like that. And so this is my host file. Show you that. So here I specify the servers that I want to provision in groups. So I have my DB servers. I only have one for this example. I have my app servers. I have 2 app servers. And I have a proxy. And the site YAML is probably the most, well, it's not the most important file, but that's the file that you run. Oops. Looks like this. I specify which hosts I want to run certain roles as. And roles you can see as a collection of tasks that I want to run against these servers. So I want to do some common tasks, like install Vim, for instance. I want to do that on all my servers. And so I've put the installation of Vim inside this role. And on the app servers, I also want to install Java. And Ansible uses a lot of variables. And you can have group variables, which is per server group. So I can, for instance, have a group variable that's called a file with variables for all app servers. So these variables will be for all app servers and not DB servers or other servers. I can also have a file called all, and that will be variables that will be valid for all servers. So this is convention in Ansible. I can also have host vars, which I recommend not using too much, because here I specify like the name of each box, which is not really what I want. And this is the most important part, the roles, because they contain everything that's going to be done. It's got a directory for files, which are files that I want to copy onto the remote host. It's got templates where you can use variables, you can use loops, you can use a lot of like programming-like structures to create templates of config files, for instance. You may want to have different config files for different environments and such. And it uses Jinja 2 as a templating language. I got handlers, which really is tasks that I want to call if something special happens. For instance, if I change a config file, I want to restart the server. And I want to call those handlers. What's nice about handlers is that you can have handlers restarting servers at several places in your tasks. And if there's several, and you say that this task should restart the server and this task should restart the server, it waits until all the tasks have completed before it restarts the server. And only if a task changes, so only if the config file has changed will it restart the server. You can also, and tasks, that are the concrete tasks that you want to accomplish. Variables, you can also specify variables inside roles. You can specify variables many places when you're doing Ansible. And I recommend you to have conventions for that, because Ansible has a lot of conventions, or they have a lot of options for specifying variables. So this is how you run a playbook. So the site YAML, which is my top file, I run as a playbook. It's called a playbook. And the first time I run my playbook also takes a lot of time, so I've done that on beforehand. And it looks something like this. So what it does is that it sets up the DB server, and for the DB servers, it updates the apt cache and doesn't really do anything more. For the app server, it updates the apt cache, and then it installs the Java. And you can see that something has changed. That's in yellow. If it comes out in red, something went wrong. So that's basically, there's 2 servers that have changed, and 2 are the same. And then there's this notion of facts. Ansible uses facts. And facts, that's facts about the servers you're about to provision. So it collects facts from the machines you're about to provision before you provision them. And these facts can then be used in playbooks and in templates. So you get some information about the servers. I can try to run this against one of the app servers. You'll see it's got a lot of information about the server. And these are variables that you can use in your playbooks, like IP addresses, date time on the server, all the devices that are attached, a lot of information. So the task I'm going to show you is I'm going to create an app user called DevOps with a home directory and an SSH key. I will set up a Postgres database, Nginx as a reverse proxy, a service, install a service for my application. I want to deploy an application that uses this infrastructure. It looks like this. The proxy in front, got 2 app servers for load balancing and zero downtime deployment, and they all talk to the same DB. Ansible has excellent documentation. So this URL you'll use all the time. List of all modules. You'll find excellent documentation of everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is install Vim. And I will also insert a line file type indent off in my vimrc file, because it's really annoying when it indents by itself. So let's have a look at that. And I put stuff like that, like installing Vim. I don't create an own role for that, because I want to do it in all servers, and I just put them in a common task. And that, like installing like basic software, I put there. Yeah. And I have to check out task 1. This is how I do it. You saw this earlier. I use apt as my package manager because it's a Ubuntu, but you can also use all sorts of package managers depending on which distro you're working on. So Yum, or even on my Mac, I can use Homebrew as a task. I want to install Vim. I want it to be present. If I want to uninstall it, I would say absent. I could also say latest here, which would make sense for Vim, but it wouldn't make sense if you installed some database or something, because you want to make sure that you have the right version. And here I insert this line into this file. So you see, it's really readable. Let's try to run that. Yeah, I just showed you this. So, And what I do here is I use a tag. I'll show you what that is. Tags vim. The reason I use a tag is to make it go faster, because I don't want to run through all my tasks every time I do a change. I want to just install Vim. I just want to do that tags. And that tag is not the name of the role. You have to explicitly give the tasks tags. So like this is why this tag works. And you can also have several tags for combinations of stuff. So now it's done, and it's installed Vim. So let's just log into one of the servers. I got Vim. I can actually Vim the, oh, what's the path again? You can see that it has entered the line at the end of the file. So what have we done? We've installed software and we've manipulated files. Yeah, I talked about variables. Variables are really powerful because if you want to do a lot of stuff that are similar, you want to use variables to not write all these tasks per thing. For instance, if you want to install a bunch of software, you want to use a variable, a list that contains all the software, and you want to loop over that in one task. And that is what we call infrastructure as data. It means you have all your data inside variable files, which makes it really easy to, for instance, switch provisioning framework, because the data is the most important, not how you will use this data to provision your servers. And Ansible has very many options. You can read about it in the documentation. You can define it in the inventory, which is the host file, which defines all the hosts I have. You can use group vars and host vars. You can have it in the playbook itself. You can use facts. You can use local facts and remote facts. And you can also specify them as arguments on the command line. And many more. As you can see, you can also do it in the roles. And the way you access the variables is by using double curly braces and the name of the variable. So next thing we're going to do is to create an application user. And what we do then is that we create a new role, which we call users. So just to show you that I haven't cheated, I can't. There's no DevOps user on this machine. So I created a new user role, which looks like this. I create a group. Well, let's actually have a look at the variables first. The app servers. I've created 3 variables, the user, the group, and the username. I want to use these in my playbook or my role. So here I create the group, I create the user with a comment, which is the username. It's supposed to be in this group. I want to create a home directory. I want it to be this. I want it to have the default shell bash. I want it to be present. And I want to create a directory. I use the file module for that. You can create files, directories, soft links, and such. And I want to set the ownership and the mode. And it's a directory. And then I want my public key to be in the authorized keys file on the server. And then I can use some built-in functions. So here I look up my public key, which is on my local machine. So I want the line in this file to be inserted into the line in the destination file. I can also specify a regular expression so that I don't insert a new line every time I run this task. This is probably not the best regular expression. I should maybe use a variable of some sort, but it works in this example, so I won't insert a line every time I run the playbook. Yep, showed you the variables. So I showed you the role, and let's try to run it. I only do it on the app servers because I don't want an application user on the other servers. And I skip tags, the app, Vim, and Java. I don't want to run those. So this goes fairly fast. See, I've created a group, user, all the tasks are successful. Let's run it again. You see that it's OK. So nothing changes when I run it again. Let's see if that worked. Yep. You can see that it's inserted my public key inside authorized keys. And it hasn't added the line twice. So we've installed software, manipulated files, and created a user, and set up an SSH key. So next thing I'm going to do is to install and configure Postgres. I'll have to go fast on some of these tasks because I don't have enough time to do everything and explain everything in total. So I'll very quickly go through this. My role looks like this. It's got a config file that I want to just have copied onto the server. I want to have a handler which restarts the Postgres if something has changed. My tasks, and I want to have a template file for my config. So first thing I do is I define some variables, and here I have defined a data structure. So I've got all these variables that belongs to the Postgres installation. So I can access these variables by typing PostgreSQL dot and the name of the variable. And I also have some DB specific variables to create a user and passwords and such. And my template looks like this. So you can see that I want the host called DevOps. It's called the same as the name. I want the user to be DB user, and I want the address that I specified, the hosts I want to be able to connect to the database. And my handler looks like this. So it's a service task, and it's what service, and what should it do? It should restart it. And let's have a look at the playbook itself. Oh no, the role. Pardon, I have to try to use the correct words. Yeah, I have two two task files in this. So my main file includes two files. So the first file just installs the repository to install Postgres from. So that's not that interesting. Let's have a look at the Postgres file itself. So I use apt to install Postgres and another package that I need for Postgres. I just copy the config file to a certain destination, and I use the PostgreSQL version here, because that's the name of the directory where it should go. And here you can see that I notify my handler. And I have the name of the handler here, which is restart Postgres. So this task will notify the handler to run if something changes here. And in the next task, I use my template. And I also notify the server here. So if something changes here, it won't restart the server immediately. It will wait to see if there are more changes before the handler runs. Ansible has a lot of built-in modules that you can see in the list of all modules. For instance, it has Postgres modules. So it's really easy to create a Postgres DB and a user. So let's try to run that. I want to run that just on the DB servers and only the tasks with the tags pg install. That actually takes some time, so I think I'll maybe just proceed and we'll go back to that task because install the database. Well, yeah. Yeah, well, we'll try this later to log on to the server and see if it's actually happened, or you can trust me. What we've done is that the new thing we've done is that we have installed and configured our database and a database user. Now it's time to deploy. And this time I'm going to use variables in my hosts file. The host file which is also called an inventory file, is where my hosts are defined. And I want to set this parameter in my playbook, serial 1. The reason I want to do that is because Ansible runs things in parallel. So it provisions my servers in parallel. And I don't want to provision my app servers in parallel. I want to do it one at a time. Because if I'm going to be able to have 0 downtime deployment, I have to do one at a time. So it's done. I'll just move along. So here, this is my hosts file. And I've declared some variables here. So I use my group of servers and a colon vars. This means I can define variables here, like HTTP port and which database to use for my application. And in my playbook, whoops. So you can see, I want to run all these tasks on my app servers, but I want to do them one at a time. So you can see that all the previous tasks are, or all the previous roles are defined here. So on the app servers, I want to run common, Java, the users, and the app deployment. So I just want to run that. Yep, and I don't have any previous app there, so it fails, but I ignore it. I ignore it failing. So it's done with the first one. Now it's running the second server. What I do here is that I wait until the app is available before moving on to the next server, because I want one application to be up all the time so that my users don't experience downtime. So what I can do now is I can try to go to one of my app servers. And hey, it says I'm alive on app 1. Unfortunately, the DB says nothing. I can't get anything out from my DB. And that's because I haven't created a schema and a table yet. So the DB says nothing. So what just happened? This was a lot of stuff at the same time. I'm using the application, the home directory for the DevOps user as the home directory for the application. I copied, it's actually a template. Is that the fire alarm?
Achtung! Bitte verlassen Sie das Gebäude durch die dafür vorgesehenen und gekennzeichneten Notausgänge.
The last thing we did was to deploy an application. And I was explaining what just happened. This is how it looks on the server. I have a properties file, which is a template where I can enter properties for each different environment, for instance, if it's QA, test, prod, or whatever. And then I had a current app that was running. And what I did was that I switched the current app with a soft link to the previous app. And then I deployed a new app, and I set the current pointer to that app. And these are all the previous versions. Log directory. And I also installed this application as a service. So we can have a quick look at that. Yeah, so what I did was that I copied up my config like a template. And you could download the jar from somewhere, like from Nexus or whatever, with the get URL task. But what I did was that I copied it from my local machine. So I created a small Java app for the example. And this is where the magic happens with deployment. Here I use the command task, and that's actually not a very, I won't recommend that actually, because running a command means that you can do whatever. And that means that Ansible doesn't know if the task was successful or not. So, and this task will always run as yellow, as something has changed, because it doesn't know what should happen. But you can specify a desired outcome with, what's it called again? It's called successful when. You can specify that as a tag and have a condition. And here I read the name of the previous deployment stamp, and I register it as a variable. Here I register it as the result of the command. I register as a variable that I can use later in my role. So here I create a file, which is a link to the previous version. So I set the current version to the previous version. And that is if this command succeeds. The variable I register here is like the result. It includes the standard out, the standard error, the return code, which should be 0 if it was successful. So I only create the soft link if the previous command succeeded with the return code 0. I used a new, this is my new version of my app. I create a current link to that. I copy up the service script, and I install that as a service. And it's enabled, and the state is restarted. So I always restart my server when something has changed. And then I wait until the application is available. Here I use a local action because I want it to be accessible from my local machine. And my local action waits for this port to be accessible on which host. And I don't want to ping all the time, so I set the delay of 5 to ping at a 5-second interval. Then I have a shell task, which is also not recommended, because anything can happen and Ansible wouldn't know what happened. And that actually removes the old jars that I don't need anymore, like old stuff. Yep, so now we've deployed an application and enabled it as a service. Now it's time to deploy the database. So you may remember, the database says nothing. So this is how I do that. I've created a DB role, and this is really simple. So you should probably use some framework like Liquibase or Flyway or something like that to handle your migration of databases. But anyway, here I just copy an SQL script to the server, and then I run the migration script with a command. So this is really not good practice, but it works for this example. Let's run that. Oh, I have to check out the next task. Some warnings. I won't go into that. But anyway, now it has changed. Let's see how our app server is doing. Whoa! Hello from database. Pretty cool, eh? So I've inserted a table, and I've entered a message inside that table. So it's not that impressive, maybe. But it's always fun when something happens, right? If you automate stuff, you can see it actually happen. I really enjoy that. So I won't try it. You'll just have to trust me on this, since we don't have much time. Anyway, I've migrated the database schema, and I've fetched data from it through the application. Next thing I want to do is to set up a proxy. And I want to show you this code because it's got something cool. It uses a Jinja template, and this is the config file for the Nginx application, and this is where the magic happens when it comes to zero downtime deployment. I don't know if Nginx would be the best load balancer to use, but it's the same principle. And here I use the Jinja 2 syntax for looping over the group of app servers. So this will actually enter this line for each app server in my app servers group. So it defines all the servers that's my backend. And also, it will take the app server that's down out from load balancing if something happens here. So it will sort of roll over all the app servers and try to get one of them to reply. But if an error happens, it will take the server out of the load balancing, and it will only reach the next one. Yeah, I guess that's the most interesting part of this task. So let's try to run that. I have to install it. Shouldn't take that long time. Yeah. Okay. So now it installed Nginx and created the config that makes it a rolling load balancer. I can try to go to my proxy server. So see that this is my proxy server. And if I refresh it, it switches between the two app servers. Cool. I like it when stuff changes. So what we've done now is we set up a reverse proxy for failover between the two. And people always find it hard to do this zero downtime deployment when it comes to databases. Because if you do database changes, they're all going to the same database, which is the new version of your application may not be compatible with the old version. So if the database is different between the two. What we do to prevent that is that we use the expand contract pattern. That means that before we deploy our applications, we do all the things that are compatible with both the old version of the application and the new version of the application. That means like adding tables, adding columns, tweaking indexes. We can do that because it will work with both versions. Most of the time. Sometimes it's more complex, but like in 99% of your deployments, this will work. And then the contract pattern we do after we've deployed, we successfully have deployed to all nodes the application. And that means that the database, after we've contracted, is only compatible with the new version. And you can do this in one go, but if you're a little bit more of a coward, you can run the expand and then wait a little bit, see if everything works, deploy the applications, see if everything works, and then run the contract pattern. This can also be used for rollback. So then you roll back the contract, deploy the new application, and then you roll back the expand. So this is how you do it. This is our architecture. First of all, you do the pre-upgrade of the database. Both applications are compatible. And then you take the one app server out of the load balancer, and you upgrade that server with a new application. Then you point the load balancer to the new version of your application, and you upgrade the other. Finally, you do the post-upgrade. And now both applications are compatible with your database schema. So that's actually, yeah, I actually came through. This is something for you to play with. I don't think I should do it here now because we're out of time and I would like to keep the schedule. But I think we should probably make time for some questions, if that's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ansible has a thing called Ansible Vault, where you can encrypt your secrets, and then you will have to type in that decryption password every time you run your playbook. And that may work for this simple example, but you, like in a bigger environment, you would have to have some, you have to roll your own, like getting it from some secret server or something like that. But yeah, you can encrypt the passwords. Yep.
If you have a role which has like different runtime variables specified for this role, like different Ansible CFG, where would you like store these different data? So because if you define the Ansible CFG in the project's top level, it will be taken, but you cannot define like this additional or this one specific role runtime settings.
Yeah, you can provide it on the command line. That's one solution. Maybe not the best solution. Well, I don't think you can do it in a playbook or something like automated. some way. So you'll have to create a wrapper around it or something like that. Yeah, but I don't use different Ansible CFGs because it's just like, well, if I have different inventory files, for instance, I will always provide them on the command line. So then I would say -- inventory and then the path to the inventory file. You can simplify that by creating wrapper scripts, for instance. Like just say deploy QA, and then that shell script or whatever will run the Ansible task for you. Yeah. Yep. You'll have to do that in the, in your. I wouldn't use like plain old SQL scripts and load them. I would use something like Liquibase or Flyway. That's a very broad topic that I could talk about. Expand contract works in most cases, but if it's really complicated database changes, it may be hard to use the expand contract pattern. But if you're doing continuous delivery, you should do small changes also on your database schema. So you should not do these huge migrations when you deploy something. So it's almost always possible to find a tactic for using the expand contract pattern. I recommend you read the book Refactoring Databases. It's a really good book on Addison Wesley. Can't remember who wrote it, but yeah, find it on Amazon. Yeah.
There's the problem of using command or shell. So on the task are always in state change. Is there a way to work around this?
Yeah, you can write conditions for when it's successful and when it fails. So, and that would be adding the tag when successful. And then some condition, or yeah. I think it's when successful, or someone remember? Yeah, something like that. Yep.
What happens when two or more of my roles conflict each other? Does Ansible tell me something about it? How does it handle it?
No, you'll have to find out that yourself, I guess. So it doesn't have any logic for like comparing tasks you run and see if you're doing things twice in a different way or something like that. But it has a dry run mode where you can see what it would do. But that, unfortunately, doesn't work with the command and shell. So that will always run even if you run in dry run mode. Any more questions? Yeah. Yeah, you could. Yes. Ansible has something called Ansible Galaxy, where you can download roles. To be really careful about that because they can contain whatever. And there's also several people that have shared their roles on GitHub. And I was asked in the break about variables. You can specify them everywhere, right? But if you share your role, it makes sense to put your variables inside the role, like defaults, and then you can override them in your own variables. So there's a convention for writing reusable modules too. More questions? No. I forgot this slide. We're having DevOps days in Oslo for the first time this year. And I would really like, if you want to attend, unfortunately the call for proposal is closed. The program will be out soon. We've got Chris Boitart and Mark Burgess as keynote speakers. We're really lucky and happy to have them. But if you'd like to attend, visit the DevOps Day site and navigate to Oslo. It will be an amazing event. Thank you.